Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Josh Hinson Journey podcast. This is your lovely host, Joshua Hinson, back with episode 2. How's everyone doing this evening? I want to get started off, do some quick housekeeping. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Norbit Gates, NORBITGATES. And I also got 2 questions from listeners. The first one is, how many times a week are you going to be doing your podcast? I expect to be doing my podcast, let's say 2 times a week, once on Monday to get the weekend news, and then probably once on Friday to get the week news, so probably Monday, Wednesday, something like that. Maybe just once a week. We'll see how it goes. The second question is, why are you only on YouTube? Why is your podcast not on iTunes? The funny thing is, iTunes won't recognize me as an actual podcast. I guess that speaks volumes of how poor my first podcast was. I guess I wasn't that great my first podcast. iTunes won't make it official. I'm assuming it has something to do with the requirements in the description of my podcast. I probably didn't put down that I cuss from time to time, and that has something to do with it. Who knows? But I will look into that on Wednesday when I have nothing to do but go to the bank. So let's dive into this podcast. First thing I want to talk about, I'm upset. It's not Amazon. Amazon was great with my other package shipping. Everything went well. I appreciate it, Amazon. The Chicago Cubs, I was looking at their record against the Philadelphia Phillies. They are 2-5 on the season against the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, as a diehard Cub fan, all I've known all my life is just horribleness. With the exception of a couple seasons here and there, like 03, 08, seasons like that. But this team is so young. Let's count the rookies on the club right now. Addison Russell, shortstop. Chris Bryant, third base. Javier Baez, utility man, third base, second, short, wherever you want to play him. Jorge Soler, right field. He's currently on the disabled list. Kyle Schwarber, left field. So, counting those rookies, I understand that there's going to be some ups and downs with young players. But on the season to go 2-5 against the Philadelphia Phillies, who are playing for the number 1 draft pick this year, is just inexcusable, in my opinion. That's just me. Maybe because this year they're doing so well, I expect them to play better against the worst teams, But you get swept at home in the first half of the season, I believe. It may be early second half. And then you impress us to get swept at home to the Phillies in the first place. Inexcusable. That should not happen. No circumstances. I don't care who's pitching. I don't care what. Kyle Hendricks, Jake Arrieta, John Lester, any of those guys can take the Phillies. I mean, you could probably throw a double-A pitcher in there, and probably they could manage against the Phillies. They could probably go 5 innings, probably give up 2 or 3 earned runs, something like that. But you can't get swept at home against the Phillies. The next thing, they go to Philly on the 4 days. 4 games, 4 days. First day gets rained out. Second day, they play doubleheader. Dominate in the 2 doubleheaders. And then the next 2 days, the bullpen just blows it. I mean, we had each win on the 2 days, and our bullpen just blew it. I mean, especially on the 4th day of the 4th game, the 4th day, that Cubs should have had that. And the bullpen has always been a question mark, in my opinion, as long as I've been a Cubs fan. In my opinion. I can especially remember from the Carlos Marmol days, which I know, we vastly improved from the Carlos Marmol days. We've improved since then, but I guess since all I know is heartbreak as a Cubs fan, I'm always expecting them to blow the game. I hope that changes in the future. Hopefully it does. Maybe it doesn't because these guys are so young, but it's just inexcusable to go 2-5 against one of the worst teams in the league on the season. Should never happen. And maybe it just has something to do with these kids playing up to competition like colleges do. Like just this weekend, we saw Auburn, I believe the number 6 in the nation. Jacksonville State took them to overtime. And then Virginia took Notre Dame to the final drive. Notre Dame had a miraculous, I think, a 32-yard throw with like 12 seconds left in the game. I mean, those two games were phenomenal games. If you didn't watch it, especially watch the Jacksonville State Auburn game. I mean, you could tell right out of the gate, Auburn didn't want to be there. Jacksonville State knew they didn't want to be there, and they took advantage of it. And I guess that has to do with these kids being teenagers and not thinking much of lesser competition. But anyways, that's a side note. But if you didn't watch those two football matches, or football games, sorry, I've been watching soccer all weekend. Football games this past weekend, I suggest you watch it. Phenomenal games, especially the Auburn-Jacksonville State game. That one was fantastic. So that is my Chicago Cubs rant for this podcast. So let's dive. This may be a sports podcast. I don't know. Just I want to talk about some things that have been in the news. I am currently typing on my computer. Sorry about that. So, Dana White, I heard on I was listening to Joe Rogan Experience with Tom Segura was the guest appearance or whatever you call it. And Joe Rogan mentioned that Dana White is being sued by a couple former fighters. He didn't say that, but the gist of the Dana White being sued part is Dana White, the UFC have a monopoly on the sport, blah, 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 whatever. The big thing from this is that not really many people outside the UFC community have talked about, which I understand, is that Dana White now has an iPhone. If you keep up with UFC at all, you know that's a big deal. Because Dana White has always expressed he's never going to get an iPhone, he's never going to use it, there's no need for it, he just needs to call people and yell at other people on the other end of the phone. He just needs to have something to scream at other people with. But the big thing is, he has an iPhone now. And I guess part of him being sued, they need to track what he's emailing, calling people about, who he's calling or whatever. But in my opinion, that is huge. But he's getting sued, and I don't understand why they need to keep up. If I understand this correctly, which I don't I understand why they're suing him, but I don't understand the whole iPhone thing. Why don't you can easily just track his computers that he had. He probably has multiple computers, or if he has one, you track his computer. That's easy enough. That's probably where he does most of the work anyway. But I understand wanting to see who is keeping up with calling and all this other crap. But I want to know from that story, did his lawyer tell him, like, hey, it would look better on our part? I mean, we know we're going to win this, but it would look better on our part if you got an iPhone and just pleased them? Or part of UFC being sued is that they made Dana White get an iPhone. But that happens, When you get sued, you got to do all this ridiculous stuff that the other people want you to do just to please them until you kick their ass in court and then you laugh at them, and then you go back to doing what you're doing. Staying on the UFC topic, I was watching the, I guess you call it a press conference for the Conor McGregor-Aldo fight, and Ronda Rousey, and they had Holly, what's her last name? Rome. But the thing is that Holly Holm is her name, who's fighting Ronda Rousey on this upcoming card. I believe on January 2nd, it's UFC, this would be 195 on January 2nd. So it's the one, I believe it's taking place where the Cowboys play football in Arlington. I believe that's where it's taking place. But I was watching the press conference, and I've been keeping up with UFC for a couple years now, and Chael Sonnen, I watched towards the end of Chael Sonnen's career, towards the end of Forrest Griffin's career, and those guys, they talk, or especially Chael Sonnen, not so much Forrest Griffin. He did talk shit, but Chael Sonnen is what I really want to focus on. Chael Sonnen talked so much shit about other UFC fighters, and that was just his thing, just to try and get in their head. McGregor does the same thing, but he kind of takes it to a different level. I'd say he gets more personal, a little bit more personal than Sonnen did. And the main difference between these two guys is that Chael Sonnen, if you hear him in press conferences and interviews talk shit about other fighters, you can hear it in his voice, and you can just see it on his face. He doesn't actually believe everything he says. If he says, "Oh, Anderson Silva, I'm gonna kick his ass. I'm gonna, just stand up with him and fight," and all this other junk and all this shit, he knows that's not true. He knows if him and Silva fought, he has no fucking chance. But he has to say that because how's that gonna look on him if he's fighting his opponent and he treats him with the utmost respect? I get some fighters do that because they're friends, and they don't want to talk shit about their friend. I understand that. Ronda doesn't talk shit at all. Ronda Rousey doesn't talk bad about anything except bitch Correa, because she fucking deserved it. Ronda's said that she's friends with most of the female fighters in the UFC. She's gonna state the truth, but besides the truth, she doesn't really need to talk shit. She's 20 years ahead of the sport. There's no need for her to talk trash about anyone, unless it's bitch Correa, because she deserves it. But back to McGregor, the thing with McGregor is that McGregor actually believes everything he says. And I get that, where he's at in his career, no one's made him say, "Hey, you're not that good," and no one's ever proved it to him. But he actually believes everything he says. He says he's the best this, best that, he can whip your ass any fucking day of the week, all this other shit, blah, blah, blah. And he actually believes every word he says. Whereas, Chael Sonnen, if he doesn't say it, how's it going to look on him? And McGregor, I understand why McGregor does it. It's all to get in the opponent's head, and it does a lot of times. And it also has to do with the fact that he's just that good, to be honest with you. And I hope he's got, in my opinion, he has gotten too good too fast. He needs to be taken down a notch, in my opinion. He's become too flashy, too showboaty. When he knocks a opponent down, just talking shit, telling him to get back up. I don't like that. I know it's great to get the average fan in there and to get the average fan to pay for the pay-per-view match and everything. And I understand that UFC doesn't have a lot of stars that average fans know. So I kind of see why UFC, they don't allow him. They kind of encourage it a little bit, because besides Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, I guarantee you the average fan knows of about probably 2 more fighters. That's about it. They may know more. I don't know. But outside of McGregor and Rousey, probably the average fan doesn't know too much about the other fighters. So, I understand why the UFC kind of encourages him a little bit to say, all right, go on, keep talking a little bit, we'll allow this, But I understand, and Dana White doesn't get involved with any of that, If it's, racist, over the line, anything like that, then yeah, definitely Dana White will get involved. He's one of those guys who, if you go over the line, he's going to call you out on it and tell you don't knock it off, pretty much. It's like, knock it off. There's no need for that here in the sport. We don't allow that. We don't condone it. Just knock it off. And while I'm talking about that, I want to talk about Ronda Rousey for a little bit. Rousey is just, we all know it. She's ahead of her time. She's 20 years ahead of everyone else in her sport. And it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal just to watch her fight. And now I don't know how long she's going to fight for, because let's see if I can look up her age really fast. She is 28, and, that's not old, but she can definitely make a lot more money doing literally anything else. Because the new Reebok deal, fighters get paid less, all this stuff. If you want to look into the Reebok deal, just type in UFC Reebok deal on Google. You'll get a ton of articles. Read them if you want to know more about the Reebok deal. Basically, the Reebok deal is UFC's wants to make the sport more professional. And when you make the sport more professional and not so ragtag teamy, which I call, it's like not thuggish, but like average Joe-ish, just these dudes just coming in, banners, advertisements everywhere. It doesn't look good. And with the Reebok deal, I have noticed there are no more banners. Advertisements in the Octagon have definitely gone down. Now it's like Bud Light, Metro PC. I think maybe Harley Davidson does sponsors a couple fights. And then, of course, Reebok is on all the fighters' shorts. And I think they might fight with Reebok gloves. I don't know about that. But especially with the Reebok deal, listen, in my opinion, I like the Reebok deal. I don't like it for the fighters because I don't know everything about the Reebok deal, but the fighters get less money from fighting with the Reebok deal. But the sport as a whole looks a lot more professional, in my opinion. But as I've heard, the top fighters, McGregor, Rousey, all these other guys, Mighty Mouse, they all had to take a pay cut, and I understand why they're upset with that. But in my opinion, if it helps the other fighters, the lower fighters in the UFC, guys starting out and all that, I'm for the Reebok deal. I'm for the guys just starting at, the rookies, who are just like their first couple fights. I'm all for letting them make more money and the top fighters making less money, because the top fighters are gonna always make money all out of the Octagon. Rousey's in movies, advertisements, McGregor's in all these advertisements now that I see. And so they're always there's always opportunities for them to make more money outside the Octagon if they want it. Whereas the lower fighters is you're maybe some guys maybe have a second job if it's like your first fight. If you get to the UFC, obviously, you're probably not gonna have a second job, but hey, you never know. Someone might not be smart with their money, so they gotta pick up a second job or something. And so if it helps the lower fighters where all they do now is they focus on fighting in the UFC, I'm all for it. And I'm all for the lower fighting's getting paid a little bit more so they don't have to work a second job, so they can focus full-time on UFC, while the top fighters get less money because they're always going to have the opportunity. back to us talking about Rousey staying in the UFC. I don't know how long she's going to stay in it for because, listen, she is she can be a supermodel. She can be an actor. She can do speaking engagements, whatever, and be making triple what she makes in a UFC fight. Probably more than triple, probably quadruple or 10 times as much. I don't know. I don't know how any of Hollywood works with acting or anything. But if she became a full-time actor, she would be fine. She would never have to work again in her life. I know if she retired right now, she would never have to work again in her life. But, it's hard to stay hungry when you're on top and you have nowhere to go but down because you feel like, I'm the best in the world at what I do. I'm the best at everything, So there's, I get when you get to that level, you have no motivation at all. But each fight, she shows that she is staying motivated. Especially the bitch Correa fight where Correa called out her family, and that's one thing you don't want. You don't want to piss off Ronda Rousey coming into the ring. If I was fighting her, I would not talk shit about her at all. I would say nothing but nice things. I would send flowers to her mom. And if she has siblings, I would treat those siblings very nicely until after the fight because I don't want to piss off Ronda Rousey coming into the ring. The octagon. You call it the ring, whatever. Who cares? So that being said, I want to look at the movies she's been in. Let's see. She's been the Fast and Furious 7. She was in The Expendables. Oh, she was in Roadhouse. Oh, I did not know that. Oh. Is pretty nervous about the Roadhouse remake. Oh, it's the remake of Roadhouse. Okay. So that's cool. And she's going to be in Mile 22, directed by Peter Berg. If you know what that movie's about, cool. If you don't, that's fine. So, why I'm staying on this sports topic, let's talk about NFL. In my opinion, I don't believe the NFL is going to exist in 50 years. I was watching the Panthers-Jacksonville game. I know. You're like, why are you watching that besides Cam Newton? I know. But let me explain. I was watching the game. I always usually watch the first couple games of the season, and then I get bored of the NFL, and I go back to watching soccer. So, during the Panthers-Jacksonville game, I counted about 13 players that went down with injuries, and about 3 quarters. I didn't watch the fourth quarter, so out of those 13, there had to be a good 5 head injuries out of those 13 injuries on the field. And Darrell Williams sprained his knee for the Panthers. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. Luke Kuechly got a concussion. If you watch that live, I don't think there's any way he's going to be back next week or the week after. I think he's going to be out a couple weeks. He took a hard hit. Just like Josh McCown. Who was that? Cleveland? Josh McCown, I believe, was Josh McCown for the Cleveland Browns. If you haven't seen that replay of him just diving into the end zone and just getting crushed by 2 players, it is. If you're squirmish, don't watch it. Just know that he got hit hard, and Johnny Football, is going to be taking over the Browns for the next probably 6 weeks or until. Oh, got a phone call. Oh, they can wait. So Johnny Football is taking over the Browns for the next couple weeks because McCown got just demolished when he tried to dive into the end zone for a touchdown against the Jets. If you haven't seen that, go check it out on YouTube. But if you're squirmish, don't look at it because trust me, you don't want to look at it. It's a horrible, horrible concussion. One of the worst I've seen in the past couple of years, in my opinion. That it's just, he looked like, if I can describe the McCown getting injured, when he went to go dive, he got hit in the head, and it spun him around like the blades on a helicopter, 180 degrees, and then he got hit again by another player. I believe this time in the legs, but when he came down, he landed straight on his face, and he's going to be out for a while. Back to Luke Kuechly, his concussion, he tried to get up, and he just couldn't. He walked off under his own power, but it took him a good 4 to 5 minutes to get up and actually walk it off. And just even the concussions, and the knee injuries. And if the NFL exists in 50 years, players aren't going to be playing for more than 2 years. Because as guys get faster, they get bigger, they get stronger, your body can only take so much of that. And in 50 years, who knows where we're at with athletes? Because everyone's just getting bigger, faster, stronger, and the human body can only take so much. So in 50 years, if the NFL is existing, then players aren't going to be playing for more than 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 at the most. I think if you play more than 5 years, you're a quarterback or maybe a wide receiver who, is tall, and you don't go across the middle a lot. You stay towards the sidelines. And speaking of concussions, another thing that I think is going to bring the NFL down is the movie called Concussions, starring Will Smith. He's about a doctor in Pittsburgh who basically discovers what a concussion is and all this other stuff. And I think this movie is going to hurt the NFL a lot. It comes out on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2015. It's called Concussion, starring Will Smith. It looks like a phenomenal movie. I don't know I would put it out as the same day as Star Wars, because I believe Star Wars is coming out Christmas Day too. Because if you have people choosing to go see the new Star Wars movie or a movie about guys getting hit in the head in football, most people are going to go see Star Wars. I'd put it out a couple weeks after Star Wars, but that's just me, whatever. So back to the real thing, I was talking about NFL not existing in 50 years. That movie is going to hurt the NFL a lot. Because basically, from what I've read, the Sony executives were scared that the NFL is going to sue them. Because basically in the movie, they're saying that the NFL knew about concussions the whole time. They knew what concussions were and how serious concussions were, and they just ignored it for so long. And the movie kind of calls the NFL out on that, and this doctor trying to fight the NFL to, hey, you need to notice this. And so the movie pretty much states that they've known about concussions the whole time. Of course, the NFL is going to come out and say, if we did know about concussions since not the beginning of football, but since technology allowed us to, we didn't know the severity. They didn't know how severe it was. That's obviously what they're going to say, because they kind of have to say that in order to not look like the evil people that the NFL executives are, especially Roger Goodell. I'm looking at you. So, and while I'm on concussions, I don't think college football is going to last that much longer. And if it does, I think you see guys staying 4 or 5 years in the NFL. I mean, not in the NFL, in college football, because they know they kind of need that degree from their university. But I think you're going to see, once NFL starts to go down a little bit, popularity, people playing football, you'll see a lot more college students that play football. You'll see a lot more of them not just taking communication classes and getting a communications degree or a degree in sociology. Like here at Wake, sports players, you either, at like most schools, you either get your major in communications or sociology. Those are the two main majors that if you play collegiate sports, that's what you're doing. And I think over time you'll see a lot more sports players start thinking, "Hey, I can't do this forever. I need to take a major that's actually gonna help me in life." So I think in the future you're gonna see college students taking more difficult majors like biology, economics, mathematics, history, all that stuff. You'll see, maybe a lot more doctors. Maybe a lot more of them will become athletic trainers or something like that. Who knows? But that's what I think about the NFL and concussions. If you didn't want to listen to all that, main thing I said, NFL, in my opinion, is not going to exist in 50 years. And with concussions, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Oh, Wisconsin. A Wisconsin player got injured. Oh, man. Let me look this up because this is what really got me. Wisconsin concussion. Let me look this up because I don't remember who the player was that got a concussion, but he got up. It was Wisconsin. It was the Wisconsin-Alabama game. Star safety. Let's see. I'm gonna butcher his last name. Michael Caputo, number 7 for the Wisconsin safety. He got injured. He got a head injury on a play and tried to join the Alabama huddle. And the doctor's reactions were fantastic in this case. I know in collegiate, doctors are more careful about head injuries, but that NFL had to be looking at that and just think to themselves, I can't believe this just happened. Because it is a primetime game against Alabama. And when Alabama plays, everyone is watching. And you have a player that gets a head in and tries to join the opposing team's huddle because he doesn't know where he's at. It doesn't look good. There have been a lot of articles calling for the NFL to improve everything, but that's been happening for years. Improve everything as far as head injury wise, protocols, all that other stuff. It's been happening for years. So that it doesn't look good for the NFL. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. In my opinion, NFL is not gonna exist in 50 years. So, and that's about it for this podcast. I made a short podcast. I know I really only talked about sports. If I make a podcast on Friday, it will be more diverse. This weekend was just a big... I was furious with the Cubs, with the Philadelphia Phillies series. I just found out about Dana White being sued and NFL with concussions. I was going to talk about that anyway, so I decided just to make it a sports-themed podcast. Get some baseball, get some football, get some men and women fighting in a cage. Get everything. Get everything sports-wise into this podcast. So that's about going to do it. You can find this podcast on YouTube. My channel is called The Josh Hinson Journey. This is episode 2 of the Josh Hinson Journey. You can, if you don't want to watch on YouTube, you can go to Podomatic, Podomatic, Podomatic.com/The Josh Hinson Journey to find this episode of the podcast. And I hopefully will be back on Friday, unless things just go terribly wrong and I die. If I die, hey, you won't see me, but I plan to be back on Friday with with episode 3 of the podcast. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Josh Hinson Journey.